But one thing during the O.J. Simpson trial, and we always refer to that, they spent so much time on the DNA evidence that the jury was falling asleep because it's such a complicated area of evidence. So it might be that you would almost need someone with more education to sit and listen as if they were in like a lecture hall being lectured to about certain type of evidence, because or else they're going to be bored to tears and it's going to go over their head and you're going to lose them. That's just my opinion, Mike.
No, it's true. Yeah, I will also say Judge Lance Ito, lost control of that case because they were only taking testimony, I think at one point, 2 hours a day. And so it went on far longer than it should have. And DNA was in its infancy, really, when you think about it. And they wasted a lot of people's time. They bored people to death. And I think people just tuned, what do they call it? Tune out and drop out or whatever, intellectually. And I think they did that. I think you're absolutely right. If you're going to have a highly technical presentation by the prosecution or defense, you're going to want someone who maybe has gone to college. If you're going to talk about, say, you're going to bring in autism and, later on, you're going to want somebody maybe who went to college and took a course in psychology and at least has heard of these words and these things that they might not teach in a high school. You're right. It seems a little bit snobby, but occasionally it comes in handy to figure out what is this person capable of understanding.
One of the big considerations in this case also is that the jury, whoever they may be, and again, the jury is going to be 12 jurors and 8 alternates. So a total of 20 jurors. They're going to be sitting for probably 4 months. So we were talking 16 weeks. Can they pick someone that has a really legitimate job and needs to go to work every day to make money to put them out of work for 4 months? If I was, going to be called for a jury like this, and now I'm retired, but I do my podcast. I'd even say, hey, it's a hardship. I can't do my podcast. But
right.
The point is that how many people can afford to be out of work for 4 months? And I know it's your civic duty to when you get called to be on a jury. And don't forget, folks, in our Constitution, it says you have a right to be tried by a jury of your peers. So do you want to see people that are not your peers making decisions on your life? That's scary. That's scary because, for example, Brian Kohlberger was a PhD student. So shouldn't a jury of his peers be other educated human beings that are making decisions on his life, a life or death decision in this case? So, and I'm not putting down any people, what they do for a living, their education level, but is, for example, a janitor or an auto mechanic or a domestic or a blue collar worker, is that a jury of Brian Kohlberger's peers? I'll ask that question to you, Mike.
Well, under the Constitution, it is, because so long as you're an American citizen, if you're a PhD student or you're like an Einstein theoretical mathematician, physicist with an IQ of 3,000, the auto mechanic is your peer. That's how they view it in the Constitution. The hardest thing you hit upon is that this isn't going to be a week-long trial or a 2-week-long trial, which is enough. To me, I think that's enough to ask someone to be available for like 3 months, 4 months, maybe. You're really only going to be able to get, a retired person. And so you're going to tend to have older people who are retired tend not, completely 100%, but tend to be a little bit more conservative than a younger person. So you tend to have maybe a little bit more slightly conservative leaning, law and order kind of loving, jurors. But that is an ordeal. And okay, fine. It is my duty to be a member of the juror, and I would never snub that. I would have to do it. But that would be devastating to people who maybe are working by themselves. They're a mechanic and they don't get paid unless they go to work.
Or someone who's self-employed.
Right.
But
Exactly.
then I think, Mike, the court would take that into consideration.
Sure.
And as a hardship, disqualify that person. There's people right here in the chat that's saying, I couldn't do that. I'm a single mother. They would disqualify you based on your hardship. They wouldn't make you put your child in daycare for you to sit on that jury. But then you could see how potentially excellent jurors will be disqualified because they have hardships in their life. And for example, if Mike and I were called for jury duty when we were on the NYPD, and let's just say for argument's sake, we were chosen, we would get paid by the NYPD to sit on that jury. But whatever compensation we would get for being jurors, the NYPD would keep that money.
Yeah, I had to give them the check.
Right.
That I got.
It would be a lot less than we get paid. But
Right.
the other thing in this case is the jury's going to be sequestered. So you're talking, they're going to almost be incommunicado for 4 months with their family. Well, they can talk to their family, but they can't watch television. They can't read newspapers. I would imagine they can't go on the internet because they're going to in danger of seeing something about this case that could prejudice their decision.
Yeah, Bill, it's an ordeal. And to me, honestly, I think a lot of judges are trying not to sequester jurors any more than they have to, because they don't want to make a routine out of it, because it does turn off people. And then, so what you're going to do is you might get a really perfectly good juror who's going to answer questions in that questionnaire that says, I hate law enforcement, or I hate all defendants, and my mind is made up, just to get off the juror. So that's a sad part about it, is that, the people who are going to do this, God bless them, because it's going to be a long, rough ride, and they're going to give up an awful lot of their life, 3 to 4 months of their life to do this trial. And to me, I know Brian Kohlberger deserved justice. I know the victims deserve justice, but also it just think about what that does to the jurors. And it's really unfair to the jurors.
Absolutely.